This is being live streamed. Right on. There we are.
Okay. Here we go. Great. So welcome everyone to the first episode of Sacred Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, where we come together each month in sacred conversation with women who embody and teach the sacred work of the divine feminine. So we're here having conversations to break the taboo around all things sacred. For example, this is women who are involved in the work of sacred sexuality, herbalism, women who show up as artists, musicians, astrology work, crystal work, womb wisdom, women who are writers, energy workers, healers, but all women who are showing up in the name of truth, in the name of love, and for the greatest good of humanity. So in creation of this space, this is the belief that our world has been greatly disconnected from this sacred experience of life. And a part of the mission through these conversations is to be gathering as women, bringing forth this voice of truth through love and pleasure, breaking the binds of what we've been taught as taboo. So around sacred sexuality, drugs as Mother Nature's medicine, and then rock and roll as the sacred movement of music and dance and all other movement, fitness and all this yummy stuff, which brings me to our very first guest. Yay! Cera Gagnon. So Cera, who is such a beautiful embodiment of so many of these facets under the umbrella of the divine feminine. Cera is here to help people reconnect with their higher selves through a whole person approach to fitness. She herself is a lifelong learner and is dedicated to sharing knowledge and tools to promote women's and family health. She has a master's degree in Indigenous Land Stewardship and is also a certified yoga, fitness, and medical fitness instructor. She loves to create sacred space and containers for deep healing and offers wellness sessions that are tailored to individuals' needs. So you can just see all of the strands of the divine feminine that are weaving through Cera's life. So I couldn't be more excited to have Cera here as the first guest as we speak into all of this. So thank you, Cera, so much for being here. And I would really love to just pass it over to you as we have some beautiful guests popping on to really share what your sacred work is to you.
Thank you, Meg. I couldn't ask for a better intro. Wow, yay. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to work with you, and your energy and your welcoming is beautiful. So I don't know where to start, right? But I basically think starting from scratch. So first of all, I'm a parent, I'm a mother, and that's one of the things that comes first in my life. And through that journey, I have become a bit more bold and a bit more empowered to want to share wisdom and knowledge, especially with other women and with other families and men, so that we can, like you say, break the stigmas, but also go back to, hi Rhonda, go back to a relearning of what we already knew, a relearning of our traditional ways, our traditional knowledge for all peoples, and also, the bit about the intuition and trusting yourself and the inner voice and the inner knowing is, through my mothering process, I came to found that it was sort of sometimes void of that. Our systems that are set up in society don't include it very well. So that's sort of bit of my impetus. And other than that, I've just always been someone that felt that there's got to be another way. There's got to be a better way. There can't just be one way to health or one way to heal yourself or one way to approach something. It just didn't make sense logically. So I guess that's my philosophical background. And then I guess if I keep going, so basically what happened was I had 3 children and I had 3 home births. and including the first one, which is a bit less common. And when I was teaching women afterwards, I just kept hearing these trauma stories over and over and over that matched the stories of my own family, mother, sisters, ancestors, that nobody has good birth stories, and everybody just seemed to be carrying around a lot of pain and shame, or a lot of people did. So I actually became shy and a bit embarrassed to share my own story, because there's elements of trauma in there, but mostly it's generally a positive story. And then one day I was just like, you know what, like, let's let it rip. Like, maybe this can help shed a different light on pregnancy and birth. Yeah, so I wrote this book. It's a memoir, and basically it's the book I couldn't find when I was pregnant. I wanted to just find an average, relatable story of, you know, a woman that, again, I could easily relate to, that was just sort of like, okay, what's the most logical, easiest way for me to approach this? And at that time, I just couldn't sort of see what I was looking for, and I was just, okay, I'll share the story, and then we fast forward to today. So.
I love that. So there's a couple pieces in there that you're hitting on that I feel like, you know, when we speak about the divine feminine, especially when we speak about it within circles of women, this is often, some of the things that you're bringing up are often pieces that come up. You know, that piece of like, well, I realized there were deep elements of trauma and pain that seemed to be connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
And this feeling of like, all of a sudden having to say, okay, like, I'm not going to stand for this. I want to be the one to break this chain.
Yeah.
And this piece that we were talking about too, how it can be really uncomfortable. Like, I actually loved, there was a piece as we were talking before where you said, you know, when you describe that, yeah, the motto for you is, you know, there always has to be another way. And that in your head, there was, you know, there has to be an easier way, a more intuitive way, a natural way.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100%. I love what you put though, is that there's an easier way. And it's like, there's an easier way, but at the same time, that easier way is so much harder sometimes because of the discomfort. I'd love if you could speak into.
Exactly. And I just wanted to say, by the way, like, I totally welcome people to put comments or questions or like hands up, join the chat, please. Like, we're talking about an important subject. For sure, when you go the easier way, as I call it, you know, following the voice of your intuition, breaking the mold. So whether you're you know, like someone like me that's like breastfeeding long term, or co-sleeping, or just choosing to give birth at home, or just doing anything that may not be the norm for your family, or for your culture, or for your you know, your own pack of wolves, you're gonna have to carry that on your shoulders, and it's a bit alienating or very alienating. You're gonna come under fire, you're gonna face criticism, you're gonna have a lot of doubts, you're gonna go through hurt, and so you kind of makes you stronger, I think, in the end. And I just wanted to clarify something. Like, when I decided to share this, I was still like quite terrified. I felt like I didn't have a choice, because I guess just my value of sharing knowledge and wanting to help was so, that need was so great and so present, that I was like, I will regret this if one day I look back, you know, 100 years later or whatever, 90 years later, and I didn't, you know, assuming I'm going to live to 150, right? But yeah, so I just, yeah, like you said, I had enough. And I didn't know the backlash I get. And luckily, I mostly got just backlash during the first pregnancy through the first child. You know, after that, people get used to it. But when you're breaking the mold, it's not easy.
Right.
Yeah.
And you, if you're comfortable speaking into it, because you, this was some of the things that you were sharing too, is navigating that decision-making process, especially like you mentioned, as you know, with your first, because when you have your first, right, we have no idea what we're in store for. And just as you said, I wrote this book because it's the book that wasn't there for me. And there is no parenting manual. Like, it's just not possible because everyone's journey is so unique.
Yes.
Yeah. And so as you navigate with that first child, trying to make those decisions of what is best for you, you did stumble into like the perhaps unsolicited advice from people sometimes. How did you stand your line?
Oh, well, so I guess there's two things. So in my family heritage, my great grandmother was a nurse. And then at the turn of the century, once you marry, you couldn't continue nursing. So she just did local midwifery. Like, and I don't know that she got paid for it. And my grandmother remembers getting up in the middle of the night and picking up her bag and going with her black bag and going with her to like the neighbor's house via horse and carriage and stuff. And she was delivering babies. And I don't even think they called it midwifery. And then, so there's like a touch of this in my lineage, but then by the time my grandmother gave birth in the, don't remember, 30s, 40s, whenever that was, at the beginning, they were just drugging women and putting them to sleep. And then, unfortunately, I guess she gave birth to a healthy baby, the story is, but then something happened. We don't know exactly what, and he died shortly after. So it's very, very, very traumatic. And so when she woke up, there was just like no baby. And it's hard to even talk about. And then my mom had a lot of trauma with her experiences, and she had 5 kids. So I think part of me was determined to find a better way. And after hearing like so many war stories, that's just my family. Then you add in friends and you add in extended family and you add in the media. I was scared crapless of everything to do with birth and pregnancy by the time I was an adult, you know? So part of it was just kind of like, how do I save myself? And no matter what, I'm not going through that, like, you know, or I'm going to do what I can to avoid that. So, and I think because it was still somewhere in my ancestry that there was like somebody there believed in birth, like even though my grandmother and my mother weren't given those options, like they in their own way didn't stand in my way either. Like, you know what I mean? They were very afraid, but still supportive, because they were just more like, I hope you know what you're doing. You know, so that helped a little bit. But yeah, I guess I was just determined because I had been so traumatized already by the rest of the stories. I'm like, well, I'm not joining that pile.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So there was, and for you, it sounds like there was a very strong pull to just like connection to your internal voice at
something
that
exactly, because I didn't know anybody that had a baby at home. I knew, like, you know, heard a story of somebody in the States and they were living with a group of people and maybe they were hippie or not, like whatever. And I didn't know anybody like really personally. And then and there are still people like that are not connected to the midwifery or home birth world, because it's becoming very, very popular. It's much more normal. I think that social media has normalized it a lot too. But there are still a lot of people who did look at me and were like, why would you do that? Like, that's so dangerous. Like my own physiotherapist, like my own massage therapist, like very like caringly shocked about it. So yeah, it was super interesting. And I think that I just basically, the turning point was after I met with an OB-GYN and I started the regular, you know, standard model that's in place. And I just thought, no way, you know, it was so fast, it was so rushed. I didn't feel connected. I didn't have questions answered. And then a woman I worked with was working with a midwife and she was quite happy with it. So I thought, wow, why not, you know, explored that. And then, you know, you just have one meeting with these women and you know, you never look back. You never look back, right? Our first meeting was like an hour and a half, you know, and ask all the questions you want. And I'm here, I know I'm here to be your advocate. And, you know, it feels more like you're meeting with a new, you know, like a new friend versus someone that's going to be telling you what to do. Like I really felt like she was going to be someone that would work with me, which soothed my nerves a lot. So especially for the first baby, right? So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you had 3 home births,
Yeah, I had
right?
all
Yeah.
3.
Okay.
And I think that was another driver for sharing the story. I don't know if I would have written it if I had done only 2, but yeah, I did 3.
Mhm.
So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
So, a big piece I believe for women who are feeling this call to be on that path, working with this divine feminine energy
Yeah.
is this, like, listening to that voice and listening to that intuition, or just that belief of, I know there has to be something better, or there's more, there's
Yeah.
more than what we just know. And so I can see this unfolding, like, as you share, that had to, and I love this piece because I didn't know this piece about your grandmother beforehand.
Yeah.
So I so totally see, like, oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
lineage that is in your familial line,
Yeah.
but to be able to align with those beliefs and that inner nudge
Yeah.
is really what puts you in line with this unfolding, like you said, and then naturally what would have unfolded is the book. And then as like, this must have been a process. What did it feel like writing the book?
Oh, so I like to write. So the actual process of writing was like kind of fun, and I guess, easy enough. It's not that hard. It's kind of like what I do in my day job a bit anyways, or similar to. But the process of sharing it, like actually publishing it and actually sharing it and actually doing a launch, was like terrifying. It still kind of is. I feel naked. I feel like, I don't know, lightning's gonna strike me down. I feel shame, embarrassment, like everything. It's like, I'm a very private person with my personal life in a day-to-day sense. So it took like 2 years to get to this stage where I can like speak in a podcast like this and talk about it openly. And there's nothing like, there are no like super gory details or like uber, personal details in there. But I just felt like, I'm speaking out, I'm gonna get like almost struck down, like this must be past life or something. I really felt that this backlash would come out of somewhere or something like this, and I think that's almost like this sort of ancient sisterhood wound I'm carrying, not just for doing things differently, but just because like so many people have gone through so many pain around this subject, and it's so sensitive. And part of what I was afraid of too was starting to change the current narrative and the current storyline. And I really didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I really wanted to be really careful how I phrased things. And I do have people come to me and be like, well, you can say that your story went that way, but if I hadn't done such and such, like my baby would have died. And it's just an enormously individually personal and sensitive subject, right? So I was like, when I started thinking of sharing the book, I was like, how do I approach this in a way that has integrity and feels like I'm coming forward like as a sister, as a friend, versus thou shalt do this.
Right.
So I had to ask a few women to read it and make sure that it didn't come across like that. You've got one here actually in the group.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, that's a very long answer to a short question. Sorry, but
No, well, I don't think that it can be, a short answer when we're talking about all this. I want to go just to the conversation. We have one comment. She says, I'm pretty far away from giving birth still, but I want to prepare myself because I am sure it's possible I've been unintentionally doing the opposite, just based on how society wants us to live life. Any tips on what to do or stop doing as a young woman who wants to have a beautiful home birth?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for that question. It's delicious. Don't stop doing anything. Don't stop doing anything. And if you're not already, move. Just move. Every day. Like, don't stop your workouts, don't stop your walking, don't stop your swimming. And when you get to the point where you need to adjust, your body will absolutely tell you, and you'll absolutely know. And I've researched this, like I've done like the science looking at it, and I've just spent the time reflecting on it intuitively. I think that we are not given enough credit for knowing our own comfort zones and what our body needs. I think of my grandmother, with her fourth baby, 9 months pregnant with her fourth child, having to go out and feed the goats in the dark in an icy, an icy pathway, like no snow plows, like with the snow and the cold, like she's like, what do you want to do? The animals need to be fed, So I think that what I'm still seeing anyways, I come at it a lot from the yoga fitness perspective, is we're still told to like be uber careful, and you will naturally be careful. You will naturally take care of yourself. You will move in a certain way and feel a little bit of a twinge, and you'll be like, no. But again, and you'll find different advice everywhere, but my recommendation is you really need muscle. You really need a strong body, and you need nerves of steel if you're going to go through the home birth the first time, and you can absolutely do it. But when you work out, like, you have stronger nerves, and you have more tolerance for pain, and you have more tolerance for stress. So even if you're just, and I don't mean like you have to go start lifting weights, is just move on your back, on your hands and knees, whatever, walking, it doesn't matter. Just in a pool, like, find a way. That's my biggest tip.
Yeah.
And then feel free to reach out to me, please. I love having these conversations. So anybody, like, just message me on Facebook if you ever want to chat or get more advice.
She loves that. She says that is the greatest and best ever advice. Just move. And it's funny because this is one because people do, like, it's hard, especially when when you're pregnant, is unsolicited advice is going to come your way. And I do think you really have to set your boundaries up, pretty strongly. And for you, I hear so much just in the way you speak about it, that you really had that strong belief of what you wanted, which was really helpful. Cause my first was, I totally didn't, like, I was lucky. I had a girlfriend who was a doula, but I had no idea what a doula was at that time.
No.
It didn't even occur to me. I was one of those people who, didn't even know home birth was an option.
No,
Yeah.
That would be my second piece of advice is, this is the way I look at women, right? That you are an ecosystem. So you like, or you need an ecosystem approach. So there is no one size or one solution that fits all. So create a team around you, one way or the other, that's going to honor your wisdom and honor your wants and needs. And for sure, like, things can go south, or it's not always going to go exactly how you want, but still find a way to get some people around you that will support you, that will handhold you, that will honor what you want as best you can. And so, luckily in Canada, midwifery is covered, or here in Ontario, which is awesome, right? So it's free. And even if you're going to have a hospital birth, most of the deliveries that midwives do, by the way, I think it's like over 80% are in hospital. So it's not like everybody's out there having home births, but it is increasing. It might even be a bit higher than that. So, there's midwives, there's doulas, and there's just, like, people like us that are willing to talk and have open conversations and be really, really, really raw and really, really honest. Because I think I didn't have that either, except for my midwives. And it makes a big difference when you finally find a tribe of some people that can be like, oh, you got this. Yeah, it's normal. I did that too, It really makes a difference to normalize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I do love, again, to any listeners, Cera, thank you so much for coming in with such great questions. Anyone else who has any questions, or, this is just hitting it, like, this brings up so much, in terms of memories too. I think is when we talk about this as women, like, hearing birth stories, I swear, it's one of my, like, I could just sit and listen to birth stories all day.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your stories too. It'd be awesome to hear any stories we want to share.
Yeah. That could be a whole nother podcast.
Oh, totally.
Part of what I love, and again, I'm just sort of seeing the unfolding of your path as you, this inner strength in knowing what you wanted, being called to the book, and then just hearing you naturally speak into, like, the importance again of your body and of your strength, and like healthy nerve response and all of this. So, I mean, that's a whole other facet in your toolkit, is working with women around, women and men around health and fitness. But maybe you want to speak more into how.
Well, sure. So my whole my whole thing, or my whole approach is about like whole person fitness, right? So you can't include the body without the mind. So that's why I incorporate meditations and yoga into my workouts, or vice versa. And so I really think that to me, being fit, right, or just being healthy, like, has to incorporate every single aspect of your spirit, mind, emotions, and everything. It's just a really important part, and luckily I was kind of already on that path. I already had a really good relationship with a yoga teacher that I had been working with for years, two of them actually, who were quite, I forgot to add that, so they were like just supportive of health and wellness in general, and they didn't really have advice related to birth, but just kind of keeping yourself healthy in general. So that was kind of key. And yeah, you just kind of have to set your course and stay strong. So I wasn't never determined to have a home birth. I was never like, oh, it'd be so lovely, it's going to be spiritual, it's going to be whatever. Like, I never thought that. What I just wanted a safe and as comfortable as possible birth. It was very logical. It was very like, once I did it, I was like, this is amazing. This is spiritual. This is, heart opening. This is everything, I never want to leave from this spot. But at first I was just trying to like make the best logical decision for my situation. So I really encourage women to like approach it from that aspect. And definitely, I talk a lot about fitness and exercise in the book, whatever your preferred exercise type is, because it's a very, this is not a shocker, is it? This is a very physical process. Okay? This is a physical process that involves your body. If your body is not feeling healthy, it changes the game, right? Or if your body's not feeling kind of strong. So I'm not trying to say, like, again, you don't go out and start like building as much muscle as you possibly can, but don't let it, like, if you already have it, don't let it go anywhere, you know what I mean? And absolutely, like I did, like I took it as the time that I better get in the best shape of my whole life, right? Because I know, like, you need endurance, especially if you're going to go without pain meds. Like, my births were pretty quick, but I heard stories of like 24 hours and all kinds of hours and needing to stay up throughout the night. So I was like, well, that sounds like a marathon while I'm having my period. So what do I need to do to prepare for those two things? And that was my approach. I need to prepare for a marathon physically, and then I need to prepare for the worst period times 50 I'm ever going to have, right? So then you look at like fear management and pain management at the same time. And that's where I did a lot of meditation, like daily, to get ready, and certain breathing exercises. And my breath is what got me through the actual labor. I used like the Bhastrika breath and a couple other yoga techniques, and a lot of pacing. I stayed on my feet. And anyways, if anybody wants to contact me, I can give you a whole plethora of tips to make the labor a bit shorter and more bearable. I can't guarantee it will work for you, but I can give you a toolkit, but that was the other piece. It was like, I had experienced brutal, like PMS situations in the past, which was kind of a saving grace. So I had an inkling of what I needed to get myself ready for. And for those watching that haven't given birth yet, it does get like that. There are some women it doesn't get painful for. I've talked to them, but I wasn't one of the lucky ones. It got pretty painful. Not for that long, but it did. So you don't let it come as a shock. Just get ready. Just get mentally ready and physically ready.
Yeah. That's how someone had said, it's like preparing for the greatest marathon. So that was, it's when you said that really resonated.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that's, for me, that was, I had absolutely debilitating cramps.
Yes, you did as well. I remember that you said that one time. Yeah.
And that had, I was scared. I was one of those people who was like,
yeah, I was scared too.
And all the things, again, if you like, it's great when you can find a really good book, but if you don't have a book, and I'm glad, because I went to the books myself, and because I started to go through oh my gosh, like this might kill me, because it was because of how bad my cramps were. So I was thinking, again, based on my conditioning, that labor must be worse than cramps. So if my cramps are basically killing me, this is actually going to kill me, which is one of the things that's normal for us to run through our minds during a pregnancy.
Yeah.
But for this, so actually I was one of those people where labor, albeit incredibly painful, but I did the same, like it was it was in a hospital, but a natural birth. But it was not like, it was not as painful as, like, I still think my periods were worse.
And do
Yeah.
you think it's because all your endorphins were kicking in, like your birth
Probably.
hormones? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, with my first, I had oh gosh, it wasn't a doctor. It was like a doctor in training. And so she was not very supportive in and giving me suggestions on the best position or anything. She wasn't supportive in like, okay, this isn't working, let's switch to this. So I pushed for an hour and a half with my first, which is, I went with my second and I was like, there's no way I'm going to be in that phase for an hour and a half. And so the second one was definitely way easier, but I think it was like you said, the preparation, like the mindset practices, the breath work 100%, like having music that I could tap into to, regulate my nervous system, all the things.
Totally. I'm glad that you brought that up. And this is something I was hoping we could touch on in this conversation, because I feel like it's still, maybe it's just me, I feel like it's a little bit taboo, but you said you were afraid of the pain and just the situation, and like it might kill me, or like I might like pass out from it, or just like literally won't be able to handle it. my system will go into shock of it. And I think that's a very real fear, and I especially with your first birth, because it's a new feeling, and we don't talk about that a lot, and I zero in on that quite a bit. Like, this book is my dance with fear, and especially after all the stories I've heard, like, I don't want to reiterate half of them, but they're pretty bad, a lot of them, and so you're just like, how do I get through this with my like my heart intact, my vagina intact, my body intact, and my dignity intact, right? So that there's only like, it just seems like such an overwhelming situation in the worst case scenario. And I think that many women are walking around with some variation of birth trauma, whether it's from like their dignity being invaded, or their body being invaded, or maybe just their wishes not being honored, or maybe just not having empathy, like you said, like from the person near you, right? And that's where I really think having like any person, whether it's a friend, a partner, a husband, or wife, or doula or midwife, whoever, like somebody around you that gets it, that's really important. But I just think we should talk more about fear and how we deal with that, and normalize it. Like, it's scary as hell. You can still do it, but it's scary as hell. And that's okay to say, right? Like, because I get a lot of women I talk to sometimes that are like, well, not a lot, but enough women I talk to that are like, well, I don't want to like focus on the negative. I don't want to go into the fear. So I'm just going to let it happen when it happens. Like I'll figure it out when I get there. And I'm like, oh, because you should know in it, like have an idea in advance what your options are, what you can do if you start to get scared and start to feel panicked, right?
Yeah. And this is so much, I think, like when we are talking about the goddess energy, like the goddess is the woman who is courageous and brave enough to lean into the discomfort, to lean into the fear, right? We don't run away from it. It's like the goddess, that's the warrior goddess is when we face it and like go, like, bring it on. Like, I'm choosing to walk into the fire. And I think that's it. Like, sometimes we need to just face it head on. I find too, like in reflection for me from the experience, which is why I love, that you have a book on this, because it's not even just, it's not, there's so much that we do in preparation to childbirth, then, when it's physically happening. And like you said, it's just like, whoa, like when you're just, it's, it's almost such an out of body, but so in your body experience. And I think for me, if I had gotten to have a childbirth a birth at home, what I found and what really graded me and where I feel like robbed of certain experiences was the hospital setting. And just not being like, it really took away, like the first 24 hours that you have with your baby, you should just be, in your own nesting space and just, being together for the first time. And like, especially with my first, I remember now, and I have to, like, there were some nurses that were really amazing. The nurses that I had who were there, because Malia came 5 weeks early. So if we had it was the hugest birthday party, like everyone that worked in the hospital was, was in our room, I swear. And so like the nurses that were supporting me through labor were amazing. And they're who knew that I was pushing for an hour and a half. But then, I can remember there was one nurse who once I had her, and then they took her to the nursery, which is another thing, right? Like, why are we still taking babies to nurseries?
Are we still taking babies to nurseries that
they're still taking babies?
Medical need,
yeah, that still exists. And she said, get some sleep. Don't set your alarm. We'll come wake you up when you need to come nurse her.
Do we check in first with the mother and ask like her wishes first before doing this, or we just sort of tell them this is what we're doing? Yeah.
I remember it just being told to me, and I didn't know. I've never had a baby before. So
this is why it's so helpful to get that community around you, so you go in sort of knowing in advance what your preferences are, and you have to be firm about them. And if you can't, like, I'm someone that's really hard, I don't like confrontation. So you get somebody with you who's not afraid to be like, no, maybe here, I know it's easier said than done, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so important, because I didn't know. I mean, it was great. And I see the value of it, right? We go through these things and they're lessons, and I knew exactly what I didn't want to happen. And I knew exactly where I was going to say, it didn't matter what anyone said to me. It was like, nope, my mama foot's coming down on this time. But I remember a nurse coming in, and we'd overslept. It was like 5 hours of sleep. You're supposed to nurse every 3 hours. And she came in and she was like, what kind of a mother are you? Your baby's hungry. You need to be responsible at this. And I thought, wow, a nurse told me, don't set your alarm, that someone will come and get me. I just remember being startled awake to this. And my heart,
you got shame.
I was so shamed. And then she continued to shame me, because I went and I'd never nursed before. So literally the very first time I'm trying, and she was shaming me on, you don't know how to do it. You're not doing it right. And, what she did though and I will live with this forever. It's probably one of the because she ended up in NICU, and the nurse, because I wasn't nurse, I didn't know how to nurse. So she said, your baby needs food. I have to give her formula. And we've never used formula. And so she gave my preemie formula, and then she was not able to pass her meconium. So then we ended up 11 days in NICU. And just so much, again, I was so navigating it. I was so new to what was happening. We misunderstood. I reflect on it now, and I think it was a misunderstanding, but we were told we couldn't stay in the hospital. Had I known that I could sleep in a chair beside her in her room, I would have done that now. But all these things that I just didn't know at the time. And
and it's really hard to fight back in that situation, especially when you're feeling vulnerable and you don't have the information.
Yeah. And to be at home instead, with the baby. And I think that was, it was like, I know I couldn't have been because she came so early, but I see the power of the home birth, and energetically, what you're getting with your baby in those days.
So I think, first of all, I just want to send love to your story. I didn't know that you went through all that, and that's like a trauma, right? For that whole situation. I'm just so sorry you went through that. And you're touching on something really important for me. The book is called Home Birth, but I just want to be clear. And that's kind of, it's great, and it kind of grabs attention, and for indicating it wasn't like a hospital or birth center situation, but home means you feel at home. So I should have said that right in the beginning. So there are people that, especially now, like there are people that go to birthing centers and hospitals and they do it a bit more their way. And there are doctors that will allow like music, like my sister had Enya playing in the background, and they'll allow you to like dance or like wear even like walking monitors now. If they absolutely, like, some people ask not to have them at all, but like I think it's depending like where you are, but I think that getting this knowledge before you go in is essential. So like if you want to have a wonderful hospital birth, that's why again, like I still really recommend women touch base with midwives or doulas or people that have been in that sphere or that have been involved in the home birth world, whether they did like a home birth, natural, birth in the hospital or not, because when you have that woman advocate beside you or that kind of advocate beside you, it's a world of difference. So for example, like when they said, I have to give your baby formula, like that's not the only way. Like nowadays, women share breast milk, you can buy breast milk, you can get like different qualities of it. Like there's a whole different discussion that could have happened there besides you just being told something. And so that's why I just think that's where like my midwives really came in handy, is they'll help you push back a little bit against being told something, and they'll give that space where you can check in with yourself and be like, okay, wait, does this feel awful? Or even just giving you an extra couple minutes to think about it is better than just being told, right? So
and I think I guess that's, I love that it's, where you feel at home. And I think that goes to say what you were saying, why it's important to have people who are going to feel like that supportive community. But I love that piece of also being in a space where you aren't going to feel like you're pulled out of that disconnection to that inner that leads us. It is our power, superpower as women. Or just into this energy.
Absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful thing about working with midwives. I mean, that's just worked for me, is like some people that maybe don't, like maybe you're just, even if so you're giving birth on your own, you don't have a partner or your partner's not there or whatever, like they can still really advocate for you. They can really go and talk to that person or go get information or explain exactly what's going on. Like even during a C-section, you know what I mean? And tell you what's going on and they help you nurse, like literally. And it's a much more empathic way than what you described, you know what I mean? And so they share their own stories anyway. So that I can't recommend that enough, that people at least have the conversation with them, whether or not you wind up working with one. Like it's really worth that first session in my books.
So I would love to just ask you like a couple personal questions about, what,
just a couple personal questions.
Covering all this. I mean, it's all, but what do you feel, I mean, and you've kind of touched on it, but to just really sum it up, like, why do you think this, like for you, this work that you're, writing this book and working with the body, through movement and working with the breath and all of this, why do you think it is so important? Because
if you don't breathe, you're not alive. And if second you don't move, you start to decay. There's my blunt answer. So I guess for me, it's just such a universal need. And the breath and then combined with movement, I mean, to me, it just captures everything. Wellness. And maybe it's my yoga teaching background. Like I spent 5 years working with my teacher, our guru, like one-on-one, and I learned a lot of really neat breath work practices, but more than that, I applied them. And back then, before kids, I was able to do this for like up to an hour a day. So you start to see some pretty cool results in all aspects of your life. It really is something that you can do, this kind of self-care, like that's instant, that doesn't take long, that's accessible, whether you're in a bathroom, during a meeting, if you need to sneak out, or you're at your desk, or you're with your kids, or anywhere, you can always have some control over how you breathe. And I mean, unless you're tied down, you can have an option to move or sit up straighter, or shake your back out or your shoulders or whatever. So I think that's why I like it. Just for me, it's just very universal. And I also like the idea that it applies to everybody, like doesn't leave anybody out. Everybody needs this. Everybody needs to move. and to find a way to move in a move that works for them and that they enjoy. And everybody needs to breathe.
Yeah.
And so, and then most of us have forgotten how to breathe. I don't want to say correctly, but how to breathe in a way that most empowers you and allows you to heal. And then, you know, meditation comes on the heels of this as well. That's joined right in there. But yeah, so for me, that's why it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that piece about breath, like that we forget how, I mean, we know how to breathe and we can do it intuitively, but we are conditioned again to breathe so much just into the chest, right? We forget to have that deep belly breath that
and if
we
you can slow down your breathing, you can slow down your mind, right? And then eventually your breath is what controls your emotions. So you can take this to whole different levels, right? And then, as you know, of course, you can go to the intuitive level, and it can connect you to, you know, your higher self, your guides, your angels, whatever. It can enhance your prayer, like whatever your personal practice is. So like that's a whole different aspect that I'm you know, obviously very interested in too. But I just love that just your average person, whether you're, you know, knee deep into spirituality or not, you still have these needs. And I want to demystify it. And I think sometimes people, like, I don't want people to feel like I have to go like to an ashram or learn from a guru or whatever to get into breath work and to get into meditation. It's just not the case. You know, that's I'm just an average person that learned this stuff, and it's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do it. You can do it while you're doing the dishes. It's like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I think for you and me, this is old hat, like very, very common, but there are still people that it still sounds a little woo-woo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said too, I think there's that element of depth to it, right? Because breathing is something that we do innate, like it's just learned.
Yeah.
And so yes, we can go about our day-to-day lives, and unconsciously we can sometimes, like, you know, hit the notch and like give ourselves what we need. But there's the difference between, you know, unconsciously hitting the mark versus intentionally hitting the mark. I think that goes into sort of the depth that you were just tapping into there. Where when we go into that depth is when, you know, we begin to experience that richer the richer textures within our life.
Do you have a favorite breathwork practice, or one that you've been leaning into lately?
I do. You know, it's David Elliott. Is the one who is like the father of this one. I'm trained in advanced meditation and in yoga, which incorporates breath work. So of all like the yogic breaths that I know, but this one you do it for, you know, when I do it, it's like an hour and a half. And it's the one that I find I love because it really does take me to a transcendental state.
Wow.
And it's deep breath into the belly, another breath into the heart, and then out the mouth. So, and it's like it's like sipping through a straw. And
I love it. And do you use music? Like, how do you keep this up for a whole hour and a half?
Yeah, I'll pick a playlist to put on in the background.
Nice.
I find, you know, like when I'm at those points, just again, like as women, you know, we have cycles. And so when my emotions like build up, or when I'm like going to lose it on my husband, instead of losing it and just like having that total where I just fall apart, it's like, okay, I need to go and I need to go and do this. And it, like, whatever needs to be moved, you know, like, I'll scream, I'll completely bawl, you know, like there's just so many levels of healing for me that happen through that work. Yeah.
That's awesome. Good for you. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all have these practices, I think, or, you know, we're looking for them. So
yeah, we're looking for them. Exactly. Yeah.
And the last thing I would love to know is just like, what do you absolutely love about your work? What is it that you just like your heart sore?
I really love teaching, I guess, and I just love seeing other people happy, like other people. I love seeing when the people that I'm working with, whether it's in teaching or like individuals, just sort of, there's a moment where you just feel like the load lightened, and you kind of go back to how we were like when we were children, right? You just, even if it's a split second, and I very much share in that joy, and that's kind of like a sacred space, and there's so many ways to do it. I might be doing it through dance and music, or breath work, or through listening, or oracle cards, or whatever. But it's just a really beautiful feeling, and I just want to help. So that's what I absolutely love about it, is the results. I'm a manifesting generator, so the loop, the feedback loop, I think feeds me, right? And then I just think it's also about having a sense of like, well, why am I here on this earth? Like, let's not waste our time. So it's just nice to help other people, so that I do feel like I guess it's time well, just logically time well spent. And yes, I know mothering is extremely good time well spent as well, and that's equally important. So yeah.
And I think
that wasn't that personal. I was expecting something more personal. Come on out with it.
well, I mean, you don't just, I'm so excited we kind of got to talk about your work, your book so much today. It's been so nice.
I can tell you a personal story before I leave if you want.
Yes, please.
So like, and it's not like that personal, but just going back to I think like just like supporting our sisters as much as possible. I remember when the first time I was pregnant, and your body changes obviously, and you feel probably more shy, especially as you get larger, or you just feel, sometimes you actually feel like you shouldn't be in public, or you shouldn't be in spaces or moving in certain ways. And so I was someone that just kept going to my fitness classes and Zumba or whatever it was, and I would just kind of like, I was maybe feeling a bit more self-conscious, but I wanted the benefits of being there, and also the community feeling. So I would kind of go to the back row and wear black. And then like, I remember one time I was like dancing, and maybe a bit more like, it was, into it, not jumping, but like I was sweating, and a woman grabbed me from the class, took me by the arm, and started pulling me to the side, and I thought it must be urgent. So I went with her, and I thought like maybe she needed help, and she's like, I have to tell you, you have to stop, because like I did what you were doing, and like my baby doesn't sleep very well, and like she's very agitated, and it's hard to calm her, and like what you're doing is not okay for your child. And like, this is like literally in the middle of the class where everybody was looking at us, and I was like, I think I just said something like, thank you, like I gotta go back, and everybody's looking at us. Like, so that's just like one of the stories I talk about in the book. And it's kind of like, I felt like everybody was looking at me. I felt like at that moment, I'm like, am I bad? Like, I actually asked the teacher after class, I'm like, is cardio bad for pregnant women? And she went and researched it. And this is before I became a fitness instructor. And she was like, no, I couldn't find anything, Sarah. She's like, go for it. You're allowed to increase your heart rate. But I felt so shy after that, going back to the classes, even though I still did, and so this is just another reason I wanted to have, start having these conversations, because they're small moments, but they do still happen. And I think it's changing, but I still think we give women this sense of like, you shouldn't be doing that, whether it's related to sex, or it's related, they're jogging, or they're working till like whatever we want to do, there's still a lot of, like you said, this meaning a lot of judgment from others on what you should be doing with your body. And it never became more apparent to me than when I was pregnant. And the bigger you get, the more you are public goods. I don't know if you ever felt that way, but yeah. And there is some, people are obviously protective and careful with, like, helpful with you too, but it's not always in a loving way,
I think that's such a good example too of like, and just going back to like, again, what you had said about, this was the book that I needed when I was pregnant. And it's like this, like, you knew what you needed, and you wanting to show up with something that could be, could fill a gap for someone who feels like that's missing, or, it's something they needed.
Yeah.
And this, again, when we live a life, in alignment with our intuition and internal compass, that's living from your authenticity, that's living from your truth, that's, responding to that inner voice. And this is part of this is, like breaking the taboo and healing and celebrating truth and the greater good for humanity, all these things that that we know have to be expansive versus, and that's what you ripple out, right? There's the ripples that come from that versus when you respond from your conditioned self, which this woman, obviously there's fear or judgment or whatever is in her brain, making her think that whatever she did in her pregnancy was wrong, or even thinking that there's something wrong with her child, like even that woven in there. But that, like, if we're in our conditioned self, that literally is what gets rippled out. And kudos to you for having that strength and that boundary to go, like, I'm just gonna come back
in. Thank you. Yeah. I took my embarrassment with me and went right back in. That's to come full circle. That's kind of like feeling vulnerable is a massive part of motherhood, and the work that I do and sharing this story. And so I just lean into it all the time. So
yeah. Okay. And so if people want to get a copy of the book or they want to connect with you,
it's here, and it's in the for my group. I put it in the chat in the comments, and I can also send, I think it's in your chat as well, and I can also people can reach out to me. So it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles, it's at Indigo, it's like any major retailer. If you just Google my name, Cera Gagnon, then it's pretty easy to find. So,
and the book is titled Home Birth.
Yeah, it's called Home Birth. That's the main title, and then the subtitle is The Modern Memoir on Pregnancy, Midwives, Fitness, and Choices.
Awesome.
All right.
So we'll all go out and get our copies, and they can find you. You're on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Meg. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this story. Thank you so much for being this voice and for being this person who is here to bring beauty and depth and, just joy to this so powerful experience of birth.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Okay. We'll talk soon.
You're welcome. I love you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.